What if everything Prince Harry thought he knew about his marriage was built on lies? What if the woman he left his family for, the one he defended against a centuries-old monarchy, had been quietly betraying him all along? The story of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry has always carried elements of a modern-day fairy tale, an American actress marrying into the most famous royal family in the world. But as we've seen time and again with the royals, fairy tales often come with shadows. And in this case, those shadows may be darker and more devastating than anyone imagined. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. From the very beginning, Harry portrayed Meghan as his savior. She was the woman who had shown him love, loyalty, and freedom from the institution that had haunted him since his mother's tragic death. He defended her at every turn, against the press, against his family, against tradition itself. He burned bridges with his father, sparred with his brother, and all but abandoned the family that raised him. Why? Because he believed Meghan was worth it. He believed she was his one true ally in a world of betrayal. But here's the shocking question that nobody dares to ask out loud. What if Meghan wasn't as loyal to Harry as he was to her? What if the woman he trusted most was secretly keeping a dangerous secret, an affair with another man? Now, before you dismiss this as another tabloid headline, consider this. Almost every great royal scandal in history began with whispers, with quiet doubts, with strange absences that didn't make sense. Princess Diana, Charles, Camilla. History is littered with affairs that were denied, covered up, and then explosively revealed. And Meghan? She has always been skilled at controlling narratives, painting herself as the victim while pulling the strings behind the curtain. Could it be that she fooled Harry in the same way she fooled the public? Think about this for a second. Harry walked away from everything he knew, his military titles, his royal duties, his security, even his birthright as a senior member of the monarchy, all to protect Meghan. He told the world that love was more important than duty. He believed he was breaking generational cycles of pain. But what if, all along, Meghan was breaking something else, his trust? The rumors didn't start overnight. No, they began with subtle oddities, the kind of moments that at first seem innocent but over time build into a pattern you can't ignore. Neighbors in Montecito whispered about Meghan's frequent disappearances, late-night drives, unexplained absences from family dinners. Paparazzi caught glimpses of her slipping into luxury hotels, always insisting it was for meetings. Meetings with who? That's the question that gnawed at Harry until it became impossible to ignore. And this is where the story turns. Because in every marriage, there are moments of doubt. But in Harry's case, those doubts collided with the cold, hard reality of evidence he could no longer deny. Imagine his heartbreak, his confusion, his anger when he realized that the woman he had trusted against the entire world might have been playing him all along. But here's the cruel irony. Harry had built his entire new identity around Meghan. Without her, who was he? A royal exile, cut off from his family, living thousands of miles from the palace that once defined him. Without Meghan, his sacrifice would look like folly, his rebellion like weakness. And that's why this betrayal, if true, is more devastating than anything the monarchy could have thrown at him. Now pause for a moment. Think about your own life. Have you ever given everything to someone, only to wonder if they were hiding something from you? Have you ever felt that cold twist in your stomach when something doesn't add up, when the person you love most looks you in the eye, but you sense the truth is missing? That's where Harry found himself. Alone, questioning, wondering if he'd been fooled not just by Meghan, but by love itself. Let's rewind for a second. The world first met Meghan as the glamorous American actress who seemed to bring light into Harry's troubled life. She was charming, confident, and outspoken in ways that the royal family had never seen before. Harry called her his soulmate, his partner in everything. And for years, the world believed them to be a united front. But the cracks started to show after they moved to California. Rumors of arguments, whispers of tension, stories about Harry's increasing isolation began to circulate. The fairy tale image began to crumble. And then came the sightings. Meghan at expensive restaurants without Harry. Meghan spotted entering hotels under aliases. Meghan meeting with business associates in the dead of night. To the public, these could be dismissed as work obligations. To Harry, they were alarm bells he tried desperately to silence. He wanted to trust her. He needed to trust her. But trust can only survive so many unanswered questions. Now here's where things take an even darker twist. Because the man Meghan was allegedly meeting wasn't just some anonymous figure. No, his identity carried weight, significance, and danger, not just to Harry's marriage but to his very reputation. This wasn't just about love. It was about betrayal on a scale that could shake the monarchy itself. Do you feel the tension building? Can you sense the inevitability of what's coming? Every affair begins in secrecy, but secrecy has a way of slipping into the light. And when the light finally hit Meghan's secret, it wasn't just Harry who was devastated. It was the entire world watching their so-called perfect love story fall apart. The public has always been divided on Meghan. To some, she is the bold outsider who challenged an outdated institution. To others, she is the manipulative opportunist who used Harry as a stepping stone to global fame. But this alleged affair throws all of those perceptions into question. Because if it's true, then Meghan didn't just fool Harry. She fooled all of us. She crafted an image of loyalty, of sacrifice, of being Harry's one true love, all while betraying him behind closed doors. And this raises a haunting question. If Meghan was capable of fooling Harry, a man who sacrificed everything for her, what else is she capable of? What other secrets lie beneath the surface? Now let's focus on Harry. Imagine him sitting alone in that Montecito mansion, scrolling through messages, replaying conversations, questioning every smile, every word, every kiss. That's the cruelest part of betrayal. It forces you to doubt your own reality. For Harry, who has already lost his mother, his family, his home, the idea that he might lose his wife's loyalty was unbearable. And yet, the signs were all there. What would you do if you were in his shoes? Would you confront her immediately? Would you hire someone to find the truth? Or would you, like Harry, struggle in silence, torn between love and doubt? That's the battle that raged inside him. And it's a battle that would soon erupt into something the world could no longer ignore. Because this isn't just about a marriage. It's about power. It's about image. It's about the dangerous game of deception that Meghan has allegedly been playing, not just with Harry, but with the world. And once the mask began to slip, once the evidence started to surface, there was no turning back. The perfect fairy tale was about to collapse into scandal. But here's the thing about scandals. They never end where they begin. This story doesn't stop with Harry's suspicions. It doesn't end with Meghan's secret meetings. No, it spirals into something bigger, something that drags in witnesses, friends, even members of the royal family. And at the center of it all is one man. The man Meghan was allegedly having an affair with. The man whose identity will turn this story from whispers into headlines. And when Harry finally discovered who that man was, it wasn't just a shock. It was a betrayal so personal, so cutting, that it threatened to destroy everything he thought he knew about love, loyalty, and family. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What happens when the fairy tale image starts to crumble? That's the question that haunted Harry and Meghan's marriage from the very beginning of their California life. For years, they had presented themselves as the modern, glamorous alternative to the stiff and outdated monarchy. They weren't just royals, they were rebels. They were the couple who dared to love on their own terms, who stood against centuries of tradition and declared, "We will be free." And in the early days, the world bought into it. Who could forget that stunning royal wedding in Windsor? The way Harry looked at Meghan, as though she were the only person on earth. The way Meghan walked into the chapel, an American actress stepping into history. For a moment, it felt like love had conquered everything. Family feuds, tabloid wars, cultural divides. But here's the thing about images. They don't always reflect reality. Behind the smiles, behind the carefully curated interviews and Netflix documentaries, there were cracks. And once cracks appear in glass, it's only a matter of time before the whole thing shatters. The first signs were subtle. Meghan insisted on controlling every detail of their public narrative. From interviews to photo shoots, nothing went out without her approval. Harry, who once seemed carefree and spontaneous, grew more withdrawn. He echoed Meghan's words in public, but friends whispered that in private he was restless, even conflicted. Let's pause here. Have you ever known a couple that looked perfect from the outside, only to later discover that behind closed doors things were falling apart? That's the illusion Harry and Meghan mastered. They wanted you to see unity. But the truth? The truth was far more complicated. Because while Harry was painting Meghan as his rescuer, Meghan was quietly building her own empire. She was networking with Hollywood elites, positioning herself for lucrative deals, and pushing Harry further from his roots. On the surface, it looked like ambition. But to Harry, it sometimes felt like distance. And then came the silences. Nights when Meghan would disappear into another room, phone in hand, whispering with someone she didn't name. Harry, loyal as ever, told himself it was business. Meetings. Planning. But a gnawing question took root in his mind. Why did she have to hide? Contradictions started piling up. Meghan would tell Harry she had meetings with producers, only for those same producers to later deny knowing anything about it. She would claim exhaustion from work, yet be photographed the next morning glowing and energized at events Harry hadn't even known about. For a man who had grown up surrounded by paparazzi, Harry knew better than anyone that pictures don't lie. And yet, he ignored the signs. Why? Because he wanted to believe. Because the cost of not believing was too high. To admit Meghan might be deceiving him meant admitting he had sacrificed everything, his titles, his family, his honor, for a lie. And that's a truth too painful for anyone to face. Still, the cracks deepened. Neighbors in Montecito whispered about arguments echoing through the Sussex mansion late at night. Staff came and went with unusual speed, always tight-lipped, always avoiding questions. Meghan's car was spotted outside luxury hotels far from their home, and though her team insisted it was for business meetings, the question remained, why wasn't Harry ever there? Here's a contradiction you can't ignore. Harry once promised the world that he and Meghan were inseparable, a team against all odds. Yet more and more, he was being spotted alone, at charity events, at polo matches, even running errands. Alone. A man who once said he couldn't breathe without Meghan by his side was now looking like a ghost of himself. And what about Meghan? She, too, was alone. But her aloneness was different. It wasn't the solitude of a man cut off from his family. It was the secrecy of a woman with places to be, people to see, things she didn't want explained. Think about this. When couples drift apart, it's usually gradual, almost imperceptible. But with Harry and Meghan, the drift felt deliberate, almost orchestrated, as if Meghan was slowly pulling away while Harry clung tighter. And the tighter he clung, the more she slipped through his fingers. One evening stands out in particular, a charity gala in Los Angeles. Harry attended, smiling, shaking hands, giving speeches about mental health and veterans issues. Meghan was nowhere to be seen. The excuse? A prior commitment. But guests whispered that Harry looked distracted, as though waiting for someone who never arrived. Later that night, Meghan was spotted at a luxury hotel across town, dressed to the nines, entering through a side door. No official engagements were listed for her. No explanation was ever given. Coincidence? Or something more? And here's where the emotional weight comes in. Harry isn't just any husband. He's a man who has been betrayed before, by the media, by friends, even by members of his own family. He carries the scars of his mother's tragic death, scars that never truly healed. And now, the one person he trusted above all else, the one person he sacrificed everything for, was giving him reasons to doubt. Can you imagine that pain? To look at the woman you've defended, the woman you've fought for, and wonder if she's hiding something from you? To lie awake at night, replaying every word, every glance, every unexplained absence, until doubt eats away at your very soul? This is where the perfect couple image began to collapse. Slowly, painfully, inevitably. But here's the cruelest twist. Every time Harry tried to raise his suspicions, Meghan would turn the tables. She accused him of being paranoid, of letting the press poison his mind, of repeating the same patterns that destroyed his family. And Harry, desperate not to repeat the mistakes of the past, would back down. He wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her. Yet, the cracks only widened. At public events, the chemistry that once seemed electric now looked strained. Meghan would smile for the cameras, but Harry's gaze often drifted elsewhere, heavy with something unspoken. Journalists began to notice, whispering that all was not well in paradise. The very narrative Meghan worked so hard to control was slipping through her fingers. And then came the whispers of something darker. Late-night phone calls. Secret rendezvous. A man whose presence loomed just out of sight. At first, These were dismissed as gossip. But the consistency of the whispers, the patterns in Meghan's behavior, began to form a story Harry could no longer ignore. So here's the question for you. When does a coincidence stop being a coincidence? When does doubt become truth? Because Harry was about to find out. And the way he found out would change everything. One night, Harry's phone rang. On the other end was a voice he trusted. A voice that told him something so shocking, so unthinkable, that Harry's world began to spin. Meghan hadn't just been slipping away. She had been meeting someone else. And not just once, not just twice, but over and over, in secret, while Harry played the loyal husband. And in that moment, the perfect couple image didn't just crack. It shattered. But who was the man Meghan was meeting? And what evidence did Harry uncover that confirmed his worst fears? What came next would shake Montecito to its core, and no one saw it coming. Who was the man Meghan was meeting in secret? That's the question that set Harry's world spiraling. The call he received that night didn't just raise suspicions, it confirmed them. Meghan hadn't been where she said she was. She hadn't been attending official events. She hadn't been cloistered in business meetings. No, she had been with someone else. And now, Harry was forced to confront the possibility that the woman he trusted most had fooled him. But here's the thing about betrayal. It rarely begins with fireworks. It starts in silence, in subtle disappearances, in the gaps between words. And that's exactly how Meghan's secret meetings began. Neighbors noticed first. A black SUV pulling out of the Montecito estate late at night, its windows tinted, its driver alert but discreet. Sometimes Meghan was in the back seat, sometimes not. But almost always, Harry was nowhere to be seen. At first, people assumed it was business. After all, Meghan was building her brand, pursuing deals, rubbing shoulders with Hollywood's elite. But why always in secret? Why never in the light of day? Here's the contradiction. Meghan preached authenticity in every interview. She told the world she had nothing to hide, that transparency was her greatest strength. And yet, her movements became increasingly shadowy, increasingly difficult to explain. Now imagine being Harry, the man who once lived in palaces with security details tracking his every move. A man raised in a family where privacy was an illusion. And now, his own wife was slipping away into the night, telling him not to ask questions. Can you imagine the sting of that? The irony? But the meetings continued. Restaurants with private entrances. Luxury hotels booked under false names. Remote beachside villas where photographers couldn't reach. And each time, Meghan came back with excuses. She was tired. She had to take a last-minute call. It was all for work, she insisted. But what kind of work hides itself from your husband? Here's where the emotional weight crushes down. Harry had always been paranoid about the press. He had always feared being exposed, humiliated, betrayed in the public eye. And yet, the betrayal wasn't coming from the outside. It was coming from inside his home. The first real piece of evidence came when Harry noticed something strange. Meghan's calendar didn't line up with her actual whereabouts. She would claim to be in Los Angeles, yet the car logs showed her driver taking her somewhere else entirely. When Harry confronted her, Meghan brushed it off. "You don't need to track me, Harry," she said sharply. "I'm not one of your bodyguards. I'm your wife." But think about that. If you had nothing to hide, wouldn't you want your partner to know where you were? Wouldn't you want to erase any doubt? Instead, Meghan doubled down on secrecy. And then came the staff. One housekeeper, in particular, noticed Meghan slipping out of the side gate late at night, always dressed to perfection, always checking her phone with nervous anticipation. When asked about it, Meghan dismissed the staffer with cold indifference. But rumors spread quickly in a household. And soon, even the team around them was whispering that something wasn't right. Let's not forget Meghan's skill with image control. She knew the cameras were always waiting. And so she crafted a perfect alibi. She staged charity visits, friendly outings, even casual coffee runs. But behind the curtain, she was meeting someone Harry would never expect. And here's where things turned from suspicious to shocking. Because one night, Harry decided to follow her. It wasn't planned. He hadn't told anyone. He simply got in his car and drove, heart pounding, every instinct screaming. He watched as Meghan's SUV turned off the highway, heading not toward Hollywood or Beverly Hills, but to a quiet hotel tucked away in the hills. Harry stayed back, watching from a distance. He saw her step out, hair done, dress flawless, nerves visible even from afar. She entered the hotel. She didn't come back out. What would you have done if you were Harry? Would you have stormed in, demanded answers on the spot? Or would you have sat there in silence, staring at the hotel doors, wondering if your worst fears had just been confirmed? Harry chose silence. That night, he went home before Meghan returned. He sat in the dark, waiting. When she finally came back, hours later, she offered no explanation. She simply slipped into bed, pretending nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. Because once a seed of doubt is planted, it grows. Harry started noticing details he had ignored before. The late-night phone calls where Meghan whispered and then hung up abruptly when he entered the room. The sudden wardrobe changes before business dinners. The secretive emails, the burner phone she thought he didn't know about. Each piece, on its own, might have been explained away. But together they formed a puzzle Harry couldn't ignore. And then came the contradictions Meghan couldn't explain. She told Harry she was meeting a producer in Santa Monica, but the producer later revealed he hadn't seen Meghan in months. She said she was at a friend's house in Malibu, but the friend was in Europe at the time. Lies, stacking one upon another, until even Harry, blinded by loyalty, could no longer deny the truth staring him in the face. So here's the question that keeps gnawing at you. If Meghan was meeting someone in secret, who was it? And why hide it from Harry if it was innocent? Harry didn't have to wait long for answers. One night, a photograph surfaced. Grainy, but undeniable. Meghan, seated at a candlelit table in a discreet restaurant, leaning close to a man whose face was partially hidden. Their body language told the story no words could deny. Intimate, familiar, comfortable in a way that went beyond business. Harry's heart sank. The whispers, the silences, the disappearances, it all clicked into place. Meghan wasn't just hiding meetings. She was hiding a man. And here's where the contradiction strikes hardest. Meghan, who had once claimed she would never betray Harry, who had sworn that the media's lies about her were rooted in racism and misogyny, was now caught in a deception of her own making. She hadn't just fooled Harry. She had fooled the world. But Harry wasn't ready to confront her yet. No, he needed more proof. He needed undeniable evidence that would silence Meghan's excuses, her manipulations, her charm. And so he waited. He watched. He listened. And with every passing day, the truth became clearer. Meghan's secret meetings weren't accidents. They weren't coincidences. They were intentional, calculated, repeated. And soon, Harry would uncover not just the pattern, but the shocking identity of the man Meghan was risking it all for. The man who would turn this from a private betrayal into a global scandal. Because when Harry discovered who it was, his world collapsed. But that's where this story twists again, because the man in question wasn't a stranger. He wasn't distant. He was closer to Harry than anyone could have imagined. And when Harry realized the truth, it wasn't just his marriage on the line. It was his very sense of reality. What came next would break the walls of Montecito wide open, and no one was prepared for it. All right, let's pick up right where we left off. This is Chapter 3. The other man revealed, fully fleshed out with drama, tension, and a cliffhanger ending. Who was he? That was the question that haunted Harry's every thought after that photograph landed in his hands. The grainy image of Meghan leaning in close, her eyes locked on another man, wasn't just a picture. It was proof. Proof that the whispers, the silences, the contradictions weren't in his head. But proof of what exactly? Because here's the cruel irony. Knowing Meghan was with another man wasn't the same as knowing who he was. An identity changes everything. A stranger could be explained away. A business contact could be excused. But this man wasn't a stranger. He was someone Harry never expected. Someone close. Someone whose name would detonate like a bomb in Harry's world. Have you ever had a moment where everything slowed down, where your heart raced but your mind froze, waiting for a truth you didn't want to hear? That's where Harry stood. The evidence was in his hands, but he didn't yet know the face behind the betrayal. So he dug deeper. Harry called in favors. Old friends and security, photographers who once worked for the royal family, even a contact from his military days. He wanted the full picture. And what he got was more than he bargained for. Because the man sitting across from Meghan at those secret meetings wasn't just anyone. He was a figure who represented everything Harry had tried to escape, and everything Meghan had once claimed she despised. Imagine this. A polished, well-connected figure with ties to Hollywood and whispers of political ambition. Someone who could open doors for Meghan that Harry never could. Someone who wasn't burdened by the royal shadow, who represented the glitz and glamour of the life Meghan had always craved. And when Harry saw the clearer photo, his stomach dropped. It wasn't just betrayal. It was humiliation. Because this man wasn't some nameless businessman. He was someone Harry had met, shaken hands with, smiled alongside. A man who had been invited into their circle, treated as a friend, trusted around their children. Now let's pause here. Imagine your partner stepping out on you. Not with a stranger, not with someone distant, but with someone who has sat at your dinner table. Wouldn't that cut deeper? Wouldn't that feel like the ultimate twist of the knife? That's exactly what Harry felt. A betrayal so close, so personal, that it stripped him of air. But Meghan wasn't careless. No, she knew how to keep things hidden. The meetings were discreet, the phone calls hushed, the text messages deleted. She was careful, too careful. And yet, she underestimated one thing: Harry's instinct. Because Harry, for all his flaws, had grown up in a world where lies were currency. He knew how to read people. He knew how to connect dots others ignored. And the dots led him here, to the shocking identity of the man Meghan had been seeing. And here's where the contradiction becomes unbearable. Meghan had always accused Harry of being paranoid, of letting the press manipulate him. Yet here she was, caught in a situation that made her look like the very thing she swore she wasn't. The closer Harry looked, the more obvious it became. The secret dinners weren't accidents. The hotel stays weren't coincidences. The private phone calls weren't about business. They were about intimacy. They were about connection. They were about something Harry no longer had with Meghan. And that realization broke him. Have you ever noticed how betrayal doesn't just hurt, it humiliates? It makes you question everything about yourself. Was I not enough? Did I miss the signs? Was the love ever real? For Harry, these questions looped endlessly in his head. He replayed every conversation with Meghan, every smile, every fight, wondering if all along she was laughing at him behind his back. But here's the twist. Meghan wasn't just hiding an affair. She was hiding ambition. Because this man represented power, influence, the kind of access Meghan had always wanted, the kind Harry could never truly provide. Do you see the contradiction? Harry gave up power for love. Meghan may have been willing to give up love for power. And now, the world of Montecito whispered. Staff noticed Meghan glowing after secret meetings. Neighbors spoke of late-night cars slipping through side streets. And Harry? He sat in silence, watching it all collapse around him. But here's where it gets even darker. Because the more Harry investigated, the more he realized this wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. No, this had been going on for months. Carefully planned, carefully hidden. Think about that. While Harry stood before the world defending Meghan, telling anyone who would listen that she was his rock, she was slipping away to another man. While he was burning bridges with his family, she was building new ones behind his back. And that's the kind of betrayal that destroys more than trust. It destroys identity. But Harry couldn't stay silent forever. The truth was clawing at him, burning inside him, demanding to be confronted. He needed answers. He needed to look Meghan in the eye and hear her explain why. Why this man? Why this betrayal? Why now? And that's exactly what he did. One night, Meghan returned home late, her dress immaculate, her hair perfect, her phone buzzing with unanswered texts. Harry was waiting. He asked her directly, "Who was the man?" Meghan froze. For the first time, she didn't have a ready excuse. Her silence was louder than words. And Harry knew. He knew he had been fooled. He knew the perfect couple image was gone. And he knew the man Meghan had chosen over him was not a stranger, not a distant fantasy, but someone who had been in their orbit all along. Now pause. Ask yourself, who do you think it was? A Hollywood power player? A wealthy investor? Someone from Meghan's past? Because when Harry finally revealed the man's identity to a trusted friend, that friend's face went pale. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was explosive. And the revelation would set the stage for the scandal that would rip through the Sussex's world like wildfire. Because the other man wasn't just anyone. He was someone whose name, once leaked, would send shockwaves through the palace, through Hollywood, through every corner of the media. And Harry knew there was no turning back. But the question remained, what evidence would surface next? What proof would silence Meghan's defenders once and for all? Because the truth wasn't done destroying him. And what came next would leave even Harry speechless. What proof could silence Meghan's defenders once and for all? That's the question Harry couldn't stop asking himself after uncovering the shocking identity of the man at the center of it all. Whispers were one thing. Suspicion was another. But if there's one thing Harry knew from living his entire life under the microscope of the press, it's this. Without evidence, nothing sticks. Without proof, people will believe what they want to believe. And Meghan? She was a master of narrative. She could twist any accusation into victimhood, spin any scandal into sympathy. Harry had seen her do it 100 times, which meant this time, he needed something undeniable. Something she couldn't explain away with a clever interview or a tearful confession. The hunt for evidence began quietly. Harry started with the photograph, the grainy shot of Meghan at the candlelit table. It wasn't enough on its own, but it was a crack in the armor. A place to start. He showed it to a friend, someone he trusted, someone outside Meghan's influence. Their reaction confirmed what he already knew. The body language, the intimacy, the closeness. It wasn't business. It wasn't friendship. It was something more. But Harry needed more. So he did what anyone raised in a palace filled with secrets would do. He started digging. He checked Meghan's schedules against her movements. He spoke to drivers, hotel staff, even restaurant servers who might have caught a glimpse. And slowly, painfully, the pieces came together. One hotel logbook showed Meghan checking in under an alias. Another had a receipt for a suite booked for two, paid in cash. A driver admitted, off the record, that he had dropped her off at the same location multiple times, always at night, always without Harry. And then came the texts. Harry wasn't snooping at first. Or at least, that's what he told himself. But one night, Meghan left her phone on the kitchen counter, buzzing with notifications. Harry glanced at the screen, and his world stopped. Messages. Flirty. Suggestive. Impossible to misinterpret. Things like, last night was perfect, and can't wait to see you again. And the one that broke him, he'll never know. Do you feel that twist in your gut? That moment when denial is no longer possible? That's what Harry felt. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It wasn't speculation. It was betrayal, typed out in black and white. But Meghan was smart. She deleted messages, wiped her phone regularly, and used apps that made evidence vanish. Harry only caught fragments, but fragments were enough. Enough to see patterns. Enough to confirm what his heart already knew. And the contradictions piled higher. Meghan would claim she was exhausted from meetings, but Harry found receipts for champagne and expensive dinners. She'd say she was at a friend's, but GPS data from the car told a different story. Lies stacked on lies until Harry couldn't breathe under the weight of them. Now let's pause. Have you ever told yourself you're imagining things, only to be confronted with undeniable proof that you were right all along? That's the cruelest part of betrayal. It makes you doubt yourself, and then, when the truth comes crashing down, it hurts twice as much. But Harry didn't just hurt. He burned. He started collecting everything. Copies of receipts, screenshots of texts, witness accounts whispered to him by those who had seen Meghan slipping into hotels. He built a case, not just for himself, but for the world. Because he knew, sooner or later, this would explode beyond the walls of their mansion. And explode it did. Because one day, a new piece of evidence surfaced that no one could ignore. A photograph, clearer than the first. Meghan, hand in hand with the other man, entering a private villa on the outskirts of Los Angeles. No disguises. No excuses. Just two people who looked very much like a couple. The photo leaked. It hit the tabloids like wildfire. And suddenly, Montecito wasn't whispering anymore. It was screaming. Neighbors gossiped. Reporters camped outside. Social media lit up with theories, debates, outrage. Meghan's defenders scrambled to spin it, claiming it was doctored, taken out of context, nothing but lies. But the image was too sharp, too detailed, too damning. Harry's worst fear had come true. The private betrayal was now public humiliation. And here's where the emotional contradiction slices deepest. Meghan had once accused the royal family of destroying her with lies, of using the press as a weapon. And now, the same press she despised was exposing her for exactly what she had always denied being, unfaithful. The evidence didn't just shake Harry. It shook the entire community around them. Montecito, a haven for the rich and famous, became a stage for one of the most scandalous dramas in modern royal history. Every coffee shop, every country club, Every dinner party buzzed with the same question. Is it true? Did Meghan really cheat on Harry? And Harry, oh Harry, the man who had given up everything to protect Meghan now looked like the ultimate fool. Stripped of his titles, estranged from his family, mocked by the press, and now betrayed by the one person he thought would never betray him. Can you imagine that? To fall so far, not because of enemies, but because of the person you loved most? But Meghan didn't back down. No, she went on the offensive. She claimed the photos were manipulated, that the receipts were fabrications, that Harry had been poisoned by outside forces. She played the victim, as she always had, spinning the narrative to suggest she was the one under attack. And for a moment, some believed her. Her charm was powerful, her tears convincing. But the evidence kept piling up. Too much, too consistent, too loud to ignore. Harry's evidence folder, once private, began to leak. Piece by piece, damning proof found its way into the public eye. Not by Harry's hand directly, but by those around him who could no longer stand the lies. And with each leak, Meghan's carefully built image collapsed further. And yet, the most devastating piece of evidence was still to come. Because while the photographs and texts painted a story of betrayal, there was one thing Meghan hadn't counted on: a witness. Someone who had seen it all. Someone who wasn't afraid to speak. And when that witness finally stepped forward, their testimony didn't just confirm the affair. It revealed details so shocking, so intimate, that even Harry was unprepared. The kind of details that couldn't be explained away. The kind of details that turned whispers into undeniable truth. And when the witness spoke, the scandal shifted from speculation to certainty. But who was this witness? And what exactly did they reveal that made even Meghan's most loyal defenders fall silent? What came next would tear through not just Harry and Meghan's marriage, but the royal family itself. What happens when the truth is no longer avoidable? That's the moment Harry faced after the witness stepped forward, after the evidence mounted so high it could no longer be ignored. You see, up until then, Harry could tell himself stories. He could cling to denial, convince himself that maybe, just maybe, he was overreacting. But when someone stood before him and said, "I saw it with my own eyes," the last remnants of denial shattered. And what do you do when the woman you gave up your kingdom for, your crown, your family, your very identity, stands accused of betraying you in the most personal way? Do you stay silent? Do you crumble? Or do you confront her head-on? Harry chose confrontation. The scene unfolded on a night heavy with tension. Meghan returned home later than usual, stepping into the Montecito mansion with her phone in hand, her makeup still flawless, her dress too perfect for the excuse of a business dinner. She walked into the living room, expecting silence, expecting Harry to be asleep. But Harry was waiting. He sat in the dim glow of a single lamp, his face pale, his eyes sunken with sleepless nights. Before him, spread across the coffee table, were the photographs, the receipts, the screenshots, the mountain of evidence he had collected piece by piece. The air was thick with something heavier than words, the weight of betrayal. Meghan froze. For the first time, she didn't have a script prepared. Harry's voice cut through the silence. Low, steady, broken. Who was he, Meghan? And that was the beginning of the confrontation that would shake their marriage to its core. Now let's pause. Imagine being in Harry's position. The anger boiling in your chest, the heartbreak choking your words. Imagine looking at the person you defended against the entire world and realizing she may have been the one tearing you apart all along. What would you say? How would you keep your composure when everything inside you is screaming? Harry wasn't calm for long. His voice rose, trembling with the fury of a man who had lost too much already. I gave up everything for you. My family, my home, my country. And this is what you do. Meghan, ever the actress, tried to control the scene. She rolled her eyes. She scoffed. She deflected. This is ridiculous. You've let the press get into your head again. You're paranoid, Harry, just like they always said you were. But Harry didn't back down. Not this time. He slammed the photograph onto the table. Meghan glanced at it, her face tightening for just a moment before she recovered. It's nothing, she said sharply. A friend. A business contact. You're blowing it out of proportion. But Harry wasn't a fool anymore. He pointed to the texts, the receipts, the witness statements. Nothing? This looks like nothing to you? He'll never know? Who talks to their business partner like that? Her mask cracked. Just slightly. Enough for Harry to see fear flash across her eyes. And here's where the contradiction becomes unbearable. Meghan, who built her brand on honesty and authenticity, was cornered by lies of her own making. She who accused everyone else of betrayal was now being accused herself. And the irony wasn't lost on Harry. The argument spiraled. Meghan raised her voice, accusing Harry of spying, of betraying her trust by digging through her private messages. She turned the tables, insisting he was repeating the same mistakes his family had made, controlling her, doubting her, treating her like an outsider. But Harry fired back with something that stopped her cold. He mentioned the witness, the one who had seen everything, the one who was willing to speak out. Meghan's face drained of color. For once, her words failed her, because how could she explain away an eyewitness? And in that silence, Harry saw the truth. Have you ever had a moment when silence said more than words ever could? When the absence of denial screamed guilt louder than any confession? That's what Harry felt. Meghan didn't have to admit it. He already knew. But Meghan wasn't done fighting. No, she launched her counterattack. She wept, accusing Harry of abandoning her emotionally, of pushing her into someone else's arms. She painted herself as the victim, insisting that he was never present, never supportive, too consumed by his own demons. And for a moment, Harry faltered. Because that's what betrayal does. It twists the knife by making you wonder if it's somehow your fault. But then he remembered the receipts, the photos, the texts, and the witness who had risked everything to tell him the truth. And Harry's anger returned, sharper than before. The confrontation escalated into hours of shouting, tears, accusations flying like daggers. Harry demanded answers. Meghan dodged them. Harry begged for the truth. Meghan fed him half-lies. Until finally, Harry said the words that neither of them could take back. I don't even know who you are anymore. The room went cold. The marriage that once stood as a symbol of love against tradition now hung by a thread. But the confrontation didn't end there. No, it was only the beginning. Because Meghan, in her desperation, revealed something Harry never expected. A slip of the tongue. A name. A detail so specific it confirmed everything he feared. And with that revelation, the betrayal was no longer speculation. It was fact. Now, imagine the devastation of hearing that name from her lips. The final nail in the coffin. Harry's knees nearly buckled, his heart pounding, his vision blurring. He had his answer, and it was worse than he could have ever imagined. But here's where it gets even more explosive. Because Meghan's slip didn't just expose the affair. It implicated someone else, someone powerful, someone influential, someone whose involvement could ignite a firestorm reaching far beyond their marriage. Harry's confrontation had given him the truth, but it had also opened a door to a much larger scandal. And what he uncovered next wouldn't just destroy his trust in Meghan. It would send shockwaves through the royal family, Hollywood, and the entire world. Because sometimes, the truth is bigger than the betrayal. And this truth was about to change everything. All right, let's continue into Chapter 6, Meghan's defense, carrying forward the momentum directly from the confrontation cliffhanger. What do you do when you're cornered, when the lies you've carefully built are crumbling, and the truth is staring you in the face? You fight, you deny, you twist, you deflect, you defend. And that's exactly what Meghan Markle did. The confrontation with Harry had stripped away her mask for a moment. The slip of the tongue had given Harry the confirmation he needed. But Meghan wasn't the type to collapse under pressure. No, she was the type to recalibrate, to find a new angle, to turn even her own betrayal into a story where she was the victim. Think about it. From the very beginning of her royal journey, Meghan had mastered the art of controlling narratives. She wasn't just an actress on screen, she was an actress in life. Every smile, every tear, every carefully crafted line in an interview was part of a performance. And now, faced with the collapse of her marriage, she stepped back into that role with frightening ease. Harry had just confronted her with the evidence. The photographs, the texts, the witness, the name. For any ordinary person, this would be the end of the argument. But not for Meghan. She began her defense the way only she could, by flipping the script. "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking into practiced tremors. "You've never understood me. You've never listened." Harry, still reeling from the revelation, stared in disbelief. "I don't understand. Meghan, I have given up my entire life for you. My family, my country, my duty, and you tell me I don't understand? But Meghan pressed forward. Tears welled in her eyes, but her words were sharp, cutting. You abandoned me long before I ever sought comfort elsewhere. Do you think it's easy living with you, Harry? Do you think it's easy carrying the weight of your paranoia, your anger, your ghosts? And here's where the contradiction hits hardest. Meghan, caught in an affair, positioned herself as the one betrayed. She accused Harry of neglect, of emotional abandonment, of pushing her away until she had no choice but to find solace in another. Have you ever heard someone twist a situation so completely that you question your own reality? That's gaslighting, and Harry knew it. But in the fog of heartbreak, it was hard not to wonder, was she right? Had he been so consumed by protecting her from the outside world that he failed to protect their marriage from the inside? But then he remembered. The receipts, the texts, the lies stacked one upon another, and the witness who had risked everything to tell the truth. Still, Meghan's defense grew stronger, more calculated. She leaned into her greatest weapon, vulnerability. I was alone, she whispered, her voice breaking just enough to sound believable. You were distant, always angry, always haunted. I needed someone to talk to, someone who understood me. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about betrayal. It was survival. Survival. That's the word she used. As if her secret meetings, her lies, her affair were acts of desperation rather than deception. As if Harry's pain was a price she was forced to pay in order to keep herself afloat. Do you see the contradiction? The woman who had once painted herself as Harry's savior was now claiming she needed saving from Harry. Harry pushed back, his voice rising with frustration. Survival? You call this survival? Sneaking around behind my back, lying to my face, making me look like a fool in front of the world. Meghan's response was chilling in its calmness. I did what I had to do. Let that sink in. I did what I had to do. Not an apology. Not remorse. A justification. And that's where the emotional beat strikes hardest. Harry realized that Meghan wasn't sorry. Not for the affair, not for the lies, not for the damage done. She was only sorry she had been caught. But Meghan didn't stop there. She turned her defense into an attack. You think your family will take you back if you walk away from me? She sneered. You think William, Charles, Camilla, they'll forgive you? They'll laugh at you, Harry. They'll say, we told you so. You'll have no one. Not me. Not them. No one. That cut deep. Because as much as Harry hated to admit it, she was right about one thing. His bridges with the royal family had already been burned. Walking away from Meghan wouldn't reunite him with his family. It would leave him stranded, alone, with nothing but ashes. And Meghan knew it. That was her defense strategy. Not innocence, not denial, but leverage. She reminded Harry of what he stood to lose if he let her go. Not just his wife, but the last thread of identity he still clung to. But here's the twist. For the first time, Harry wasn't sure he cared anymore. Because betrayal changes you. It reshapes your heart. It makes you question whether clinging to something broken is worse than letting it go. The argument stretched into the early hours of the morning. Meghan weeping, accusing, pleading. Harry shouting, breaking, collapsing. Every word was a dagger, every silence a wound. Until finally, Meghan played her final card. She leaned in close, her eyes blazing with both fury and fear. If you expose me, Harry, I'll expose you. I'll tell the world things about you they'll never forgive. You think you can humiliate me? I'll take you down with me. It was a threat. Clear, sharp, deadly. And Harry froze. Because in that moment, he saw the full truth of who Meghan had become. Not a wife, not a partner, but an adversary. Someone willing to destroy him to protect herself. Have you ever realized, in a single moment, that the person you trusted most is now your greatest enemy? That's what Harry felt. The defense Meghan mounted wasn't about love. It wasn't about truth. It was about survival, hers, not his. And Harry knew then that the marriage he fought so hard to protect was over in everything but name. But here's where the story twists again. Because just when Harry thought he had heard it all, just when he thought Meghan had revealed the worst of her defenses, she dropped one final revelation. A revelation that made his blood run cold. Because Meghan hinted that the affair wasn't just personal, it was connected to something much bigger. Something that could implicate not just her, but others in their circle. Something that could unravel secrets far beyond their marriage. And that revelation would drag the scandal out of Montecito and straight into the halls of power. But what exactly did Meghan mean? And who else was tangled in this web of deceit? What came next would prove that this affair was only the tip of the iceberg. What happens when someone finally steps out of the shadows to confirm what you've always suspected? Up until now, Harry had evidence, photos, receipts, texts. Enough to convince himself, enough to wound his heart, enough to destroy his trust. But in the court of public opinion, in the brutal battlefield of global media, evidence can be spun, twisted, dismissed. What cannot be so easily dismissed, however, is a voice that carries weight, a voice that was there, a voice that saw it all. And that voice belonged to the witness. Who was this person? That's what made the revelation so explosive. This wasn't some paparazzo lurking in the bushes or a gossip columnist chasing clicks. No, this was someone from inside their circle. Someone close enough to Meghan to be trusted. Someone close enough to Harry to feel guilty. Someone who had watched the lies unfold, who had seen the secret meetings firsthand, who had finally decided that silence was no longer an option. Now let's pause. Ask yourself this. What makes betrayal worse? The act itself, or the realization that others knew and said nothing? For Harry, both were equally devastating. The witness came forward quietly at first. A hushed phone call. A meeting in a secluded cafe far from Montecito. Harry sat there, staring at the person across from him, bracing himself for the words that would confirm his worst fears. And then came the sentence that cut like a blade. Yes, Harry. It's true. I saw them together. More than once. Harry's heart pounded. His chest tightened. Hearing it aloud was different from seeing photographs or reading texts. This was human. This was undeniable. The witness described everything. The late-night rendezvous. The whispered conversations. The intimate gestures that no one could mistake for business. They even recalled seeing Meghan with her hand gently brushing against the man's arm, her laughter softer, her eyes brighter in a way they hadn't been with Harry for months. And the details didn't stop there. The witness recalled specific nights, specific places, Meghan slipping out of the mansion under the cover of darkness, her driver instructed to take side streets, her phone clutched tightly, as if the world depended on it. Every detail lined up with Harry's own findings. The receipts, the photos, the texts. Now it wasn't just evidence, it was testimony. But here's the twist. The witness wasn't just confirming the affair. They were exposing the scope of it. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. A calculated series of encounters that stretched back months, perhaps longer. And then came the contradiction. Meghan, who had publicly positioned herself as a woman of integrity, of values, of love, was leading a double life right under Harry's nose. The image she projected to the world, a loyal wife, a protective mother, a fearless advocate, was shattered by the words of someone who had been there, who had seen the truth with their own eyes. Can you imagine the weight of that moment for Harry? To sit there, hearing confirmation not from tabloids, not from strangers, but from someone he trusted? But the witness didn't stop there. They revealed something else. Something even more damning. According to them, Meghan hadn't just been meeting this man in secret. She had been confiding in him, sharing things about Harry, personal things, intimate details about their marriage, their fights, their struggles. Things Harry assumed stayed between them were now in the hands of another man. That's where betrayal morphs into something deeper. It's not just about physical intimacy. It's about emotional intimacy. About giving pieces of yourself to someone who isn't your partner. About letting another person into the sacred space of your marriage. And for Harry, that was almost worse than the affair itself. Because what is love if not trust? And what is marriage if not a fortress built for two? Meghan had let someone else inside that fortress, and now the walls had crumbled. The witness's voice shook as they spoke. They admitted they hadn't wanted to get involved, hadn't wanted to betray Meghan, but their conscience could no longer take it. Watching Harry defend her, watching him twist himself into knots to protect her while she betrayed him, it was too much. They had to tell him. But here's where the emotional irony cuts deepest. Even in betrayal, Harry felt a strange sense of relief. Relief that he wasn't crazy. Relief that his doubts weren't just paranoia. Relief that someone had finally spoken the truth he already knew in his heart. Yet relief doesn't erase pain. The witness leaned forward, their voice dropping. Harry, you need to understand. It's not just about the affair. It's about power. This man, He's not with Meghan just for love. There's something bigger here. Something dangerous. That sentence sent chills down Harry's spine. Bigger? Dangerous? What did that mean? The witness refused to elaborate too much, but they hinted at connections, at influence, at promises made behind closed doors. Suddenly, this wasn't just about Harry and Meghan. It wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. It was about something larger, something with implications far beyond Montecito. And that's when Harry realized this scandal was no longer private. It was global. But here's the cruel paradox. The more the witness revealed, the more Harry realized how trapped he was. Because if he exposed Meghan, he would expose himself too. His choices, his sacrifices, his willingness to defend her against everyone else. He would look like a fool, a man who abandoned his family only to be abandoned himself. And Meghan knew it. That was her shield. That was her defense. So Harry sat there, torn between rage and despair, listening as the witness laid bare the betrayal he could no longer deny. But the story didn't end there. Because after weeks of whispers, after months of speculation, the witness didn't stay silent. They went public, anonymously at first. A leaked interview, a carefully worded statement to a journalist who had been chasing the story. The world woke up one morning to headlines screaming of betrayal, of secret meetings, of a royal love story crumbling under the weight of lies. And once the witness spoke, others followed. More staff, more neighbors, more voices rising out of the shadows, confirming piece by piece what Harry had tried so hard to keep hidden. The dominoes had fallen. The scandal was out. And now, it wasn't just Harry's marriage at stake. It was his legacy, his future, his very sense of self. But here's where the story twists again. Because just as the world began to condemn Meghan, just as the walls closed in, she made a move no one expected. A move that would flip the narrative once more, leaving Harry reeling and the public divided. But what was Meghan's next play? And how far was she willing to go to protect herself from the truth? What came next would prove that the affair was only the beginning of a much darker game. How does the most powerful family in Britain react when the scandal they warned about finally explodes into the open? Because make no mistake, the House of Windsor had been here before. Affairs, betrayals, secret lovers, it's practically written into their history. Charles and Camilla, Diana and Hewitt, Edward VIII and Wallis Simpson. The monarchy has weathered storms of infidelity for generations. But this time was different. This time, it wasn't just about a royal cheating scandal. This was about Harry, the prodigal son, being humiliated on the world stage by the very woman he abandoned them for. So when the witness spoke and the headlines roared, all eyes turned back to Buckingham Palace. Would the family gloat? Would they stay silent? Or would they finally speak out about the son who turned his back on them? Behind palace walls, reactions were mixed. Charles, weary from years of family strife, reportedly felt a bitter sense of vindication. According to palace insiders, he muttered something chilling. He chose his path. Now he must live with it. Cold, detached. A father's words, but not a father's comfort. William, on the other hand, was furious. Not at Harry, but at Meghan. He had warned his brother from the beginning. He had begged him to slow down, to think, to see past the whirlwind romance. Harry had accused him of jealousy, of snobbery, of betrayal. And now, the world was proving William right. Imagine the storm of emotions he must have felt. Anger, sorrow, maybe even a twisted satisfaction. After all, nothing cuts deeper than being right about a tragedy you desperately wanted to avoid. And then there was Kate. Always the diplomat. Always the quiet strength behind the scenes. Reports suggest she felt heartbreak, for Harry, for the children, even for Meghan in a way. Because Kate, of all people, knew what it meant to be torn apart by the press. But sympathy has limits. And even Kate couldn't defend the indefensible. Now let's pause. Have you ever warned someone about a mistake, only to watch them walk straight into it anyway? Have you felt that awful mix of sorrow and vindication? That's the royal family right now. They had warned Harry. They had begged him. And he had chosen Meghan over them. Now, he was paying the price. The press, of course, had a field day. British tabloids splashed Meghan's alleged betrayal across their front pages. The Duchess of Deceit. Harry fooled. From royalty to ruin. The headlines were brutal, merciless, and relentless. For years, Meghan had accused the press of hounding her unfairly. Now, they smelled blood. and they weren't letting go. And the contradictions cut deeper. Meghan had built her brand on being the wronged woman, the victim of palace cruelty, the wife who was driven away by an archaic institution. But now, the narrative flipped. Now she was the betrayer, the deceiver, the woman who had fooled not just Harry but the entire world. But here's where the story gets even more complicated. Because while the palace might have felt vindicated, they also felt something else: fear. Why? Because Meghan knew things. Secrets. Conversations behind closed doors. Letters, texts, moments the family never wanted the world to see. And if Meghan was willing to threaten Harry with exposure, what might she do to the royal family if they turned on her now? It was a delicate balance. Publicly, the royals remained silent, issuing no official statement, sticking to their mantra: never complain, never explain. But behind the scenes, strategies were forming. Contingencies were being drafted, because they knew this wasn't just about Harry's marriage. It was about the reputation of the crown itself. And Harry? He found himself in an impossible position. On one side, the family he had betrayed. On the other, the wife who had betrayed him. Where could he turn? Who could he trust? Was he to swallow his pride and crawl back to his family, begging for forgiveness? Or was he to remain tethered to Meghan, trapped in a marriage of lies and threats? Do you see the cruel irony? Harry had left the monarchy to protect Meghan from the press. Now, the press was the very weapon being used against her. He had sacrificed his family for her love. Now, she was sacrificing his love for her ambition. And the public watched with morbid fascination. Social media erupted. Hashtags trended worldwide. Hashtag Meghan exposed. Hashtag poor Harry. Hashtag royal scandal.